All right, here we go. Welcome, everybody, to the NWSOFA-Indivisible Climate Change meeting for the month. And we have a great speaker that's going to be with us tonight, Chris Knopf, who's the Executive Director of, let's see, we got my notes here, of Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness. He's going to talk to us about trying to stop some mining, copper mining and iron sulfide hard rock mining projects that are trying to open up next to the boundary waters in Minnesota. These things tie together, and so it's part of broader environmental things that tie to climate change. But anyway, let me throw a couple of things out to you today that I was able to get. I went last month. We showed the video, Dr. Keeling's curve. And if you didn't remember, but Dr. Keeling was the guy that figured out how to measure CO2 in the atmosphere. And I looked up on the NOAA website today just to let you know that May 2002, the CO2 concentrations are 417.07 parts per million. 1 year ago, they were 414.65. So it's gone up about, almost three points in a year. And that's the site on Mauna Loa that's monitoring this, and Dr. Keeling's son is still running that monitoring site up on Mauna Loa, which is pretty interesting. Let's see. So NWSOFA, Sarah, do you want to take it from here and talk about our organization, if for those that want to keep knowing about us here? So.
Sure.
Take it, Sarah.
Okay. Well, welcome. We got a couple of new faces here that may not know a whole lot about the NWSOFA, which stands for Northwest Suburbs Organizing for Action. Oh, sorry. And we're part of Indivisible now as of a little over a year and a half ago. But we started out in January of 2013, after Obama's election, and really wanted to keep doing stuff. So we came up with progressive issues, and the first one was our gun violence prevention, which has been going strong for all these years on doing things that would make a difference. And then the second team was climate change, which is obviously a huge issue. And at this point, we keep developing new issues that are absolutely crucial and important to people. So as people got involved and wanted to work on a specific issue, they volunteered and took over leadership and started running their teams until we have a whole chapter of 8 different progressive issues. So what we would love to do is, those of you who are new to us, where our area is really 6 townships. We include Wheeling, Palatine, Barrington, Elk Grove, Schaumburg, and Hanover Park. So it's kind of this whole northwest corridor. And right now our membership is like 5,000. And we'll have folks, like you'll find out tonight, that are joining us from Minnesota. And we've had folks that join us from all over. So it's really been exciting how people get involved and get enthused about different issues, basically wanting to do something, to act. So what we do is we organize, we mobilize, and we recruit to get folks involved. And right now we're at the point where we have tons of coalition forces that work with each of our issue teams. So this is a picture of all our different volunteer leads. It's amazing. They're incredible people, sharp. Their main criteria is to educate you on the issues like Mark's doing tonight, with having speakers come in, have movies, panels, a lot of rallies, actions. And our main thing is at the end of it, we want to make sure you walk away from here that you've got something you can do that will make a difference. So this is what we call our snowflake with all the teams on it. And I won't go through all of them. I'll just highlight the ones that are hot right now. Climate change, obviously social justice, huge. We're all aware of what's going on nationally with that. The gun violence prevention, fiscal, well, really every single one of them are good. Standing with women, restoring our democracy, healthcare. The fiscal goes back into all the issues on what's going on with the budget. So if you're interested in joining us and want to do anything, we love new talents. So maybe you got something you would like to contribute or start. You can see where you can join us and look at all of our teams, our meetings, our calendar is there at NWSOFA.org, and follow us on Facebook. And welcome everybody. So hopefully you'll join us, and I'll turn it over to Mark and he can take it away.
So I'll take my speaker back off. There's my there's my beret. But anyway, this is good. So I think Chris probably well, we know there are indivisible chapters up in Minnesota too. And I don't know if there's OFA chapters up there, but there might be. So maybe this will serve as a link for you to some of those people. But anyway, I'm going to see if I can bring up. So we're going to introduce Chris here to take it away. He's the executive director of Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness. And I've got his bio up here, but maybe I would be better off just going back to the screen here and letting Chris talk about who he is and what he's doing, and take the presentation from here, and then we'll have some fun with this, and then we'll have some questions and answer time. And so without further ado, Chris, take it away.
Great. Thank you so very much, everyone, for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I am going to pull up my PowerPoint here now so that you can follow along. And I will say that if you have questions during my presentation, please stop me, and we can, we'll have time for questions and answers at the end, but during the course of this as well, please stop me along the way there. Mark mentioned I'm executive director of Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness, and it is my pleasure to be here. So my presentation is entitled Two Mines, One Threat: Understanding Sulfide Mining's Threat to the Boundary Waters in Lake Superior. And so there are two mines that are two sulfide ore mines that are being proposed for the area of northeastern Minnesota, and they present the same common environmental. Well, I know that at least some have some children that have been to the Boundary Waters. How many out there have been to the Boundary Waters? Sarah, have you been to the Boundary Waters?
No.
Okay. Well, the Boundary Waters, it gets its name because it's right on the border of Canada. And so this beautiful lakes region that you see on your screen there extends for about 150 miles or so along the Canadian border in northeast Minnesota. So you have 2,000 lakes that are interconnected like this. So it's a very unique ecosystem. And this region is at the Continental Divide. So there's water that goes up north into the Hudson Bay, and then there's water, just to the south that ends up going to Lake Superior. So there are two watersheds in northeast Minnesota here. And Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness was created in 1976, so over 40 years ago, to protect this area. So the Boundary Waters Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness is over 1 million acres, and it's owned by the federal government under the U.S. Forest Service. So it's part of actually USDA. So that's sort of the federal management agency that owns it. But this is by and large a non-motorized area. And that's what the big fight was in the 1970s, is to protect this area from motorized use. So people go from lake to lake by canoe, and then you portage the canoes from lake to lake. And these can be short portages of 100 feet or a couple hundred feet to portages that are well over a mile or so. So you carry the canoe on your shoulders, the pack on your back, and you go from lake to lake.
Wow.
So that's kind of the unique area here that's along with Lake Superior that's being threatened by these mines. And so at Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness, we have 3 pillars of our programmatic work. And that is the wilderness, people, and community. And so for the wilderness, our goal is to permanently protect that 1.1 million acres. And the focus of our work today is to stop the threat of sulfide mining that I'll get to in just a moment here. The second pillar of our work is to connect people to the boundary waters, and our program is called No Boundaries to the Boundary Waters. And so we have programs where we have provide scholarships to connect students of all backgrounds to the boundary waters. So diversity and inclusivity is an important component of what we do. And then we have a program where we provide daily stipends for volunteers that do work to help steward the wilderness and do things that clean campsites and clear portages and the like. So those are 2 ways in which we connect people to the boundary waters, and we call that No Boundaries to the Boundary Waters. We've also started an education program where we go out into schools, and that obviously is now moving to an online program. And so if there are people on that are on online right now that want more information on that, please let me know, and I can provide you with more information about that. And the third programmatic pillar of our work is to support communities up north that are gateways to the boundary waters. And so these are rural communities up there that, if you can imagine it, are becoming Trump territory. So these were areas where you can imagine traditionally blue collar areas that are making that migration to Trump areas. So, and from our perspective, we understand the need to have these communities thrive, and so we are committed to helping them succeed in ways that don't involve this type of sulfide mining that is so destructive here. And so some of these are to support local businesses, such as what we see in the middle here. It's a small restaurant in the town of Keeley up there, and supporting the refurbishing of the local state theater in the small town as well. And so this is a map that'll kind of get you situated here. So if you can see, Wisconsin is just to the east there, but it's about a 4.5 hour drive from the Twin Cities up to the boundary waters. That'll give you a kind of a sense of how far that is as you gauge the time from where you're at and outside of Chicago there to get to the boundary waters. And there are obviously a lot of people from Illinois that have gone to camp there or resorts or paddled in the boundary waters. And so, as I mentioned, these sort of battles that we're fighting today, they do have echoes in the past. So in the 1970s, when this area was set aside as a non-motorized area, it was very, very contentious. And you had, these large protests there that were protesting against those protection measures. And so today, myself and our staff at Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness, we really stand on the shoulders of individuals that were so very committed. And so the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness Act was signed into law by President Carter. And then Vice President Walter Mondale was very instrumental in helping get that legislation passed. And so it's been a continual battle since then to prevent the erosion of protections for the boundary waters, including this threat from copper sulfide mining here. And so sulfide mining is much different than taconite mining or iron ore mining. This part of the state has traditionally had iron ore mining or taconite mining. Taconite mining is a lower grade form of iron ore, which in itself has very severe impacts on the environment. But copper sulfide mining is much worse than the taconite mining or iron mining. And this is the reason why. So what you have in this rock formation, these are igneous rocks. And you have sulfide in the ore, and so it's bound up in the rock formation, and it's in that state it's inert. But once it's mined and exposed to water, it reacts with the oxygen and water to create sulfuric acid. So that's how it's fundamentally different than iron ore mining is the creation of this sulfuric acid. So this copper sulfide mining is perhaps the most polluting industry in our country. And so and you saw kind of going back to that interrelated area here of all those lakes, you can just imagine the how devastating that sulfuric acid runoff would be. So once the genie's let out of the bottle, there's no putting it back. And here's another interesting aspect of it. When you talk about this copper mining, on one side you see there what native copper looks like, where you have a rich vein of copper. That is not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is what you have on the right side of your screen there, called disseminated copper. So the actual ore concentration of copper and then some nickel is not like 50%. It's not 25%. It's not 10%. It's not 5%. It's not even 1%. What you're looking at is in the neighborhood of 0.3% ore concentration here. So what that means is that you literally have over 99% waste created from this process here. So it is a hugely intensive waste producing type of operation. So that presents an enormous risk to the environment here. Now I'll kind of give you why we call it two mines and one threat here. There are two mines here, and this is kind of zeroing in a little bit on the area. You can see on your right, on your left there, where Lake Superior is, and where the city of Duluth is there. The two mines are to the north of that. One is Twin Metals, and the other is Polymet, and both are owned by foreign mining conglomerates. The Polymet mine is actually on the Continental Divide. And if a catastrophe were to happen there, again, these have not been built yet. We're fighting those. The water would flow southward. It's called the St. Louis River into Lake Superior. And then what you have to the north there, Twin Metals, that pollution would flow to the north and would pollute the boundary waters. So these two mines threaten the Lake Superior, and they threaten the boundary waters. So these are two mines, but they present the same common threat from that sulfuric acid runoff.
I have a question. Is Twin Metals also the Hoyt Lake region?
Yes, it's in right. It's in that area. And so the question was, is Hoyt Lakes nearby? And the answer is yes. And so on your screen there, on the map to the right, where you see Polymet, the sort of reddish area there, Hoyt Lakes is just to the left of that, just to the west. So it's very, very close to that. And it is downstream from Polymet. So does someone know people up there or have a cabin up there? So anyone? So okay, so that kind of gives the lay of the land there a little bit of these two mines here. And I want to show you what they look like. So the Twin Metals site, this is a picture that I took last summer, about a year ago, when I was paddling. This is what you see, and so this is less than a quarter mile away would be the mine for Twin Metals. And so this is the sort of water resource that would be threatened by Twin Metals, and it kind of gives you a sense of the beauty of the area and what's at stake here. And the Polymet site, here's an aerial view of that, and this shows you the sort of expanse of the wilderness and remote area here. It's kind of interesting for everyone with NWSOFA here that there are some people that make a distinction between the two. Can you hear me now? It looks like we have bad connectivity here. Can you hear me now, or should I hold on for a moment?
We hear you.
You can hear me. Oh, okay, you can hear me. Good. Okay. There's often a distinction made where people will say, "Oh, Twin Metals, that affects the boundary waters primarily, so that would be the worst of the two mines here." But Polymet, you can see what a beautiful area is would be impacted by the Polymet mine, and so that is really a false distinction here. And this area here is you have peat bogs here, and it would be in addition to some of the environmental impacts I'll talk about in a moment. It would have a huge climate change impact here. That this would be if Polymet happens, it would be the single largest destruction of permitted wetlands in the history of Minnesota. So it would be a huge impact on wetlands, and by destroying this peat bog, a huge release of carbons from the peat bogs here. So again, you can see these are really very sensitive areas, very, very, very beautiful areas. And Polymet. Downstream from Polymet is the Fond du Lac Reservation. And these are some of the wild rice beds on the Fond du Lac Reservation here. And you can see how extensive they are. And wild rice or monomen is very important to the culture of the Ojibwe tribes in northeast Minnesota and northwest Wisconsin. And if Polymet were to be built and have a release of the sulfuric acid, it would destroy these wild rice beds. That wild rice is extremely sensitive to sulfate in the water, and so there are important environmental justice issues especially for the Polymet mine here. I'm going to talk a little bit about who these companies are, because this is really an important part of the story. One of these, when you look at it, it's not just also what you do, but who is doing it. And we have some extraordinarily corrupt owners of these two mines here. And Twin Metals owner is Antofagasta, which is a huge Chilean company here. And they have a track record of terrible labor rights, human rights violations, and environmental pollution in their home country and around the globe here. And this is a symbol of how aggressively they play. So shortly after President Trump was elected in November of 2016, in December of 2016, the family that controls Antofagasta, the Luksic family, bought a mansion in Washington, D.C., and rented it and continues to rent it to Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner. So immediately, the Luksic family ingratiated itself with the Trump family, and the Luksic family began an aggressive effort lobbying the Trump administration, both at the Chilean embassy and at the federal agencies, the U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management at the federal level immediately. So the Luksic family plays very, very hard, very aggressively, and immediately went after the Trump administration to try to ram the Twin Metals project through. And so it almost reads like a bad movie in that sense.
Chris,
Yes.
a question. What is this copper sulfide used for?
It is used for copper. So copper, and all the uses that we would have copper. It is likely that this copper would be shipped to China. That is likely what would happen to the copper that would be mined here. But it's used in industrial applications. Whether it's copper piping for plumbing or for other industrial uses. So, okay. Can you hear me still? Can you still hear me there, everyone? Okay. And, well, the owner of Polymed is equally as corrupt, and it also reads like a bad movie. So Glencore was founded by the gentleman in the middle screen there, Mark Rich, and Mark Rich became famous in the 1970s because he violated the embargo against South Africa and traded with South Africa. And he also dealt with the Ayatollah regime in Iran. So he became an international fugitive. And you may recall this was one of the very controversial measures at the end of President Clinton's administration when he pardoned Mark Rich there. So he was a very, very bad operator, very corrupt, and that it sets the culture for Glencore, which owns Polymed. The gentleman in the lower left of the screen there, Hayward, is now the CEO of Glencore. He was best known as the head of BP at the time of the Deepwater Horizon scandal there. And so that sort of DNA of lack of environmental concern and accountability still runs very deeply through Polymed. And Glencore has very strong ties with the Putin regime in Russia. And there you see two of the top officials at Glencore with Putin, and Putin has awarded these officials the Medal of Friendship from Russia. So this is the owner of Polymed, and they too have an extraordinarily dismal record of environmental protection. Ranging from the Democratic Republic of Congo to Canada to the United States here. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the permitting process here and how the actual system is really failing us. And for Twin Metals, it's really an effort at the federal level, where Polymed is primarily at the state level, but also involves the federal level as well. But during the Obama administration, the predecessor to Twin Metals originally had the mineral leases issued by the federal government in 1966. and those leases were renewed. And these leases were to really to have lasted for a term of like 10 years or so, and at the discretion of the federal government, the federal government had the option to renew these leases, and so nothing was done from 1966 to the Obama administration, and so the Obama administration did a very detailed assessment of the potential environmental impact of Twin Metals on the boundary waters, and concluded that it should not should not renew the mineral leases. And so those mineral leases actually expired in the last year of the Obama administration. But what happened after the Lucid family bought that mansion in Washington, D.C. For Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump, what happened after they lobbied through the Chilean embassy, after they lobbied in Washington, D.C., that they reinstated those expired mineral leases in 2017 as if they had never expired at all. And so these are leases that, like any sort of lease, actually expired, and they should have gone through a process of certainly an environmental impact statement to look at the impact of reinstating. They did none of that, and they also did not open up the leases to anyone else to be able to have those lease rights. So in 2017, they illegally reinstated those mineral leases that were expired. And then after that, in 2019, they renewed those leases. So they both like a vampire rising from the dead, they reinstated those, resuscitated those mineral leases, and then they extended them into the future for another 10 years here. And so it's truly a rigged permitting system right now. And then for PolyMet, PolyMet was much further along in the permitting process. The process began at the state level more than 15 years ago, and that process was moving through a state process, and there were several permits that PolyMet had to obtain from state agencies. And one of these was a permit to a wastewater discharge permit. And I should describe what the PolyMet mine is. The PolyMet mine is an open pit mine, so it would create a huge hole in the ground, and then it would put the waste in a huge lake of wastewater. And so this wastewater lake would be 900 acres big, and the dam would be holding back this wastewater would be an earthen dam, and it would be almost as tall as the Statue of Liberty. So here you have this huge lake of toxic wastewater held back by an earthen dam that's nearly as tall as the Statue of Liberty. And so the state had to issue a wastewater permit for this. And so the federal government, the US EPA office out of Chicago, is the regional office that oversees the state agencies, such as the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And so the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency sent the draft permit to US EPA to be reviewed. And so the scientists there wrote a detailed letter of over 15 pages enumerating over 24 violations of the Clean Water Act that that this draft permit would cause here. And so rather than send the letter from the federal government to the state agency, the state regulator, and mind you, to understand the sort of complex nature of this is at the under a Democratic governor here. And so this is a Democratic administration here. Actually said, do not send that letter over that identifies over 24 violations of the Clean Water Act that this permit would have. Instead, what happened is that because then organizations such as Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness, during our request for documents of that, we would be able to see this letter, and we would be able to incorporate that into our comments and say that even the federal regulators see the same problems that we're seeing. So they said, no, don't send it. And so what happened is that this scientist was very at the federal government at US EPA was very insistent, and there was a phone call where he read the letter over the phone. And here's a portion of that letter where this EPA scientist explains. You can see the information underlined in the attachment to this letter was conveyed verbally to the MPCA, that's the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, on April 5th, 2018. So this was read word for word to the Pollution Control Agency participants, and he identifies them. And so what he was trying to do is provide some breadcrumbs so we would know what was going on here. And so what you have here is an extraordinary effort by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency to conceal these concerns of violations of the Clean Water Act from the public. And then you had the higher ups, the Trump appointees at the regional office that were appointed from Scott Walker's state agency in Wisconsin, moved over from there to the federal government EPA office in Chicago. They were in cahoots with the Minnesota state agencies, and they kept this concern from us, the public here. And here's another way of how the system is rigged in favor of these mining companies. And this graph here gets at basically what is a big city to these huge mining companies here. And so what this orange line shows here, this graph shows the liability for cleanup cost during the history of this mine here. And so right off the bat here on the left here, that you can see that this as soon as the mine becomes operational, right now there's a small area that had been an old taconite mine that was polluted. So that's estimated to cost $75 million to clean up right off the bat. That's what they have to do to get things just to clean it up. But then it would skyrocket as soon as they start digging to a liability of $588 million. And then as this hole in the ground gets bigger, the liability gets to be over $1 billion. And then as the hole is filled in, the liability, the long-term costs of just sort of controlling the wastewater discharge from the mine is $580 million. These are numbers for Polymet and numbers from the state government. Well, here's what the in green is the actual cash that's set aside to deal with these environmental liability. You can see for the first 10 years, 11 years of the mine's operation, almost no cash is set aside to deal with this liability. And so what you have here in year 11 there, you can see you have $1 billion gap between the environmental liability and the money that's set aside here. And so what they have right now, what they are saying is that they would have a letter of credit or some other financial instrument that would show that they have that ability to have to deal with that liability. But here's the problem with that. What you will have with those letters of credit, they actually might last for like 2 years or 3 years. At the end of that time period, those letters of credit can go away. And so what you would have is this huge exposure that the taxpayers would be on the hook for cleaning up. And so this is really sort of true. This is a true example of socializing the cost of this environmental pollution, a real subsidy to this multi-billion-dollar international conglomerate here. And so this is again a rigged system in favor of the mining companies here. And here's sort of the games that are played here now. So earlier this year, or at the end of last year, Twin Metals submitted its mine plan. And so what it is saying is that, well, we're not actually going to have a big wastewater lake like Polymet. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to create a big stack of waste. And you can see how close it is from that. If you remember this, off to the left, you see this big yellow blob in the middle of your screen there. That would be this huge mound. What they would do is they would dewater it a bit, but you would still have about 15% water content there. And just to the west, just to the left, you'd have that, what you have kind of going way back here. Just to the left there is that. That is what is just to the west of that big yellow blob there. And so what they are saying is that, well, we don't have a problem with a dam here, but that's in their mine plan. They say we don't have a dam, but that's really a lie. What they have is there's actually going to be 15 to 20 to 25 or 30% water in this big mound here. And that's because it rains, it snows. You have to have like a sandcastle. You still have to have some moisture content to make sure that things don't slump. So they really have, around the berm of this, have to have a dam, an earthen dam holding water within this structure. So right off the bat, this Twin Metals plan is a house of cards. And so, as I mentioned, Polymet was where they're going to have this 900-acre lake that's held back again by this earthen dam that's as tall as the Statue of Liberty. And the consultant that said, hey, this Polymet dam, it's going to work. It's certified that a dam, a similar engineered style dam in Brazil was safe. And a few months after that certification by the same consultant that's a consultant for the Polymet dam, this earthen dam collapsed, and over 250 people died in that catastrophe. And I'll show you, and I'll be quiet for a moment as you see in real time what it looks like when these earthen dams collapse. So you can see what a dramatic event that is and how quickly that occurs there. So it's a process called liquefaction, where the particles within that earthen dam arrange themselves in a way where, with a click of a finger, that process can destroy that earthen dam. And that dam has to last for literally centuries to hold back this toxic wastewater. So it is, and that again would be borne by, average citizens. And so what are we doing here? Well, we are battling this on many levels, and we're battling it in court. We're battling it in Congress, in the Minnesota legislature, and we're mobilizing citizens. So the public narrative, and that's where all of you can help in this process here. So for Twin Metals, we have sued the federal government for reinstating those expired mineral leases and then renewing those leases. And so we drew a Trump-appointed judge in challenging that. So when it was reinstated, we sued in federal court in Washington, D.C., and we sued them. And this is one of the interesting little footnotes here, that the mineral rights are operated by the Department of Interior, the Bureau of Land Management. So the underground rights are the Bureau of Land Management. Very pro extractive industry. The surface rights are handled by the U.S. Forest Service, which is part of the Department of Agriculture. We actually have two federal agencies here. And so the Bureau of Land Management, basically the head attorney for the Bureau of Land Management came up with a story basically saying that the federal government had to renew these leases forever and ever and ever and ever, that it was not discretionary. And that is absolutely false. We drew a judge that had been appointed literally less than a year earlier by he wasn't yet 40, I believe, that was just appointed by President Trump. And then we lost that case just several months ago. We've appealed to the DC Court of Appeals. And we have always been playing the long game here, figuring if we lost at the trial court level, that we would appeal to the Court of Appeals there and play for the long run here. And so just about 6 weeks ago, on May 6th, we sued in federal court challenging the renewal of those mineral leases. And I know language doesn't help us here, because the reinstatement and renewal sound about the same here. And the reinstatement case was really a contract interpretation case, where it was whether the terms of the lease required the federal government to reinstate those leases. What we just filed here in May has to do with federal environmental laws, particularly the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA. That's the federal law that requires environmental impact statements to be prepared here. And the Trump administration did not perform an environmental impact statement when they renewed these mineral leases. They performed a watered down, what they call an environmental assessment. And so that is how we're challenging Twin Metals in court right now. And we're partnering with a number of different organizations in that lawsuit. Now, for PolyMet, we have challenged a number of the permits successfully just in the past year. So roughly in October and December of 2018, and again, this happened to be a Democratic governor, approved permits for PolyMet. And we've successfully challenged those in Minnesota State Court since then. And PolyMet and the state of Minnesota have appealed those decisions to the Minnesota Supreme Court. And to understand this sort of convoluted and frankly corrupt nature of this, the state of Minnesota basically they wanted to at the time sort of try to distance themselves. These are some elected officials from the decision to give the green light to PolyMet. So they hired an outside law firm to be the lawyers for the State Department of Natural Resources and the State Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, which is like the state EPA. Am I freezing up here? Can you hear me? And so it looks like I may have frozen up. Please let me know if you can hear me. Can anyone hear me?
We can hear you. Your audio is fine.
Okay, great. My audio is fine. I don't see you. So right now, the state of Minnesota, in its most recent budget, has approved spending another over $4 million to hire these outside law firms to fight us, and they are quite literally in bed with PolyMet in doing this. So as opposed to taking an objective view of this, they're very much in an advocate's seat for PolyMet here. And so we are also fighting PolyMet in federal court. We have sued the Army Corps of Engineers because one of the things when, I'll go back up to this picture of PolyMet here. So one of the things you do when you dig up the sort of a wetland area like this is that you create a vacuum. So that all the water, the wet areas around it also become dewatered. So in addition to creating a huge hole in the ground, you impact the water all around it. And this is the highest class of wetlands you can destroy. And so as a subsidy to the federal government or to PolyMet, they just classify these as not impacting as much acreage, and saying that it's not as important a classification of wetlands. And so we're suing the federal government for its the permit that the wetlands destruction permit, as I like to call it, that was issued by the Federal Army Corps of Engineers here. And and there's another story, another layer of this as well. So this picture that you see here right now, this land is now owned by by PolyMet, but it was not originally owned by PolyMet. This land was originally owned by the state of Minnesota, and these lands were when they were bought in the early 20th century under the law under which they were bought, that you could not destroy the surface rights to this, and so there was a. So PolyMet has now, and the state of Minnesota have now appealed our victories to the Minnesota Supreme Court, and so we will be in the Minnesota Supreme Court this fall, defending our victories. But we've really turned the tide, the public tide, in our favor now. Right now, in a most recent poll of people in Minnesota, 60% of the people in Minnesota do not support these mines and support our efforts to protect them. So protect these areas. So we've really turned by educating the public and reaching out to the public, turn the public tide in favor of protecting these incredibly vital resources.
Chris, question.
Yes.
Does PolyMet follow all the laws of Minnesota?
No, they are not. The wastewater permit would violate water standards. In fact, they would violate water standards. So no, these mines, PolyMet does not comply with state of Minnesota requirements here, and so the wastewater permit, the wastewater discharge from PolyMet, according to the studies, as part of the permitting process, the discharge will continue for centuries in violation of water quality standards. And so, and yet the state regulators gave the green light to PolyMet, and this really, shows the how the mining industry has really taken control of our state government, as well as at the federal government level, also taking control of the state government here.
So how does the state justify fighting this, spending money to fight what you're doing? I don't understand that. If there's laws that are being broken and they are fighting to support the broken laws, I don't get it.
Sure. There is sort of an unholy alliance going on right now, Jim, and it's sort of the Republicans are very supportive of the extractive industry here. And then what you have, this area of northeastern Minnesota was typically a Democratic area, a blue collar area. But what's happened, it's become kind of one of those Trump Trump territories, where it's become kind of these blue collar areas are becoming Trump territory. So, you have there are still some Democratic members of the state legislature, but they're pro mining and so they are in cahoots with the Republicans, and that's how they kind of bottle up the political process right now. And so it's it's a truly dismaying thing. So I know that you may think, oh, Minnesota has this reputation for being outdoorsy or protection of the environment. But when you look more closely, that reputation is not well deserved. And in particular, the mining industry has basically been given a free pass really since the 1970s, and it is an extraordinary thing to see this industry, which now actually only constitutes less than 2% of the gross national product of Minnesota, has this disproportionate political influence. It is just truly extraordinary. And so it's
Mark here. Could I add a couple of things? I lived in Minnesota for 12 years before I moved down here, and I've got relatives all over the state. But there are some interesting parallels between Illinois and Minnesota, in that the big cities are somewhat progressive and sort of control things, and the outstate areas are conservative. The gun culture here in Illinois is outstate. The gun culture in Minnesota is up north. Downstate Illinois, we have some fracking shale, and that's where the coal industry is. Up north in Minnesota is where you've had the mining history. But the other really interesting history of the mining stuff in Minnesota is that's where a lot of labor stuff started, years ago. And any of you, if you had a chance to go up and go through Hibben and go through the mine history stuff up there, will be amazed at what you see. And the American labor movement and the American Communist Party were very strong up in those areas. So it's really, the history stuff is really fascinating. Chris, I just had a question here. So is the support for this in terms of jobs? Why would they allow this to go in, or who's supporting this?
Sure, that's a great question, and that is really the crux of the debate here. And so what the mining industry is here's what they're saying, that they're saying that PolyMet would create about 330 jobs, and that Twin Metals would create about something over 600 jobs. And so that's not that many jobs. And but again, that was well put, Mark, how the rural areas are really hurting for jobs. And so this is the promise of bringing jobs back to the region here is why labor is pro mining here. And it's one of those sort of very diabolical things where these foreign mining companies, again, Chilean and Glencore is a big Swiss company, are portraying people in the Twin Cities as really the foreigners, where people up, where they think that we're much different than the people in Northeast Minnesota, where in actuality, we share the common interest and common goals, and it's these international companies that really don't have the long-term interest at heart here. And as Mark said, this was really some very historic roots of the labor industry. Have their very historic victories were fought and won by labor in these areas, and it's very dismaying sort of thing to have this sort of in the Democratic Party, this sort of fracture. And so it's from a political perspective, a huge issue. And so the way we're as an organization, we're approaching it is that maybe I'll speak to the economics a little bit. And so these international mining companies, they have mines all over the world here. And so right now the mine is not profitable and wouldn't be profitable based on copper prices. And so they would open and close this if these mines are permitted and built. They would open and close these mines regularly, and with automation becoming a greater force in mining, you would have even fewer jobs than those 300 and those 600 some jobs that are promised. So it's really a false promise, and that's out there. And even if these mines were to be built, the cyclical nature and how mining industries use these they have all these like cards on a deck. These mines are all around the world, and they can open and close them to deal with current market conditions. And so you would not have stable employment here. And there was a detailed analysis how by an economist from Harvard that looked at 65 different economic scenarios with the mine being built, and the mine not being built, and for virtually all of those, but 2 or 3 scenarios, the not having the mine was significantly better for the long-term health of the region. And in part, what you have is you drive out other industries by having the mining industry, and you become dependent upon one industry, and you're vulnerable to these ups and downs. And so you never diversify the economy. You push away people that might want to work remotely and live in a beautiful area like that. And so it's as a nonprofit organization, that's why we want to be part of supporting sustainable jobs in those communities, and not vilifying pro-mining people, and really reaching. I made a concerted effort to reach out to them and say, look, we are pro-community, we're pro-people, we're pro-labor, but we're not pro-pollution, and so and so that is we're trying to build those bridges, and these areas up here, much of the areas don't have reliable broadband internet service. So we want to be part of helping bring broadband internet service to these communities, for example, there. So, anyone have any follow-up questions or comments or thoughts? I, kind of welcome answering those.
This is Mike. I've been in Minnesota for about 2 years, but I grew up in Chicago, joined the Navy, joined the National Weather Service. I've been in Grand Forks, North Dakota for about 18 years, so I'm a little bit familiar. But there's a very large recreation outfitters and for fishing and paddling, and also residents that just want to live up there. So, but that's mostly the warmer seasons. But there's some, I don't know if there's snowmobiling, but cross-country skiing and some winter sports up there. So it seems like if that area is polluted in some way or degraded, that would be less of an attraction for commuting with nature.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So this is, this incredibly sensitive environmental area, and it's a very important recreation area. And so in our lawsuit in federal court, some of our co-plaintiffs, many of them are outfitters from the area, and resort owners that have small lodges and just outside the boundary waters, and they're very concerned that once the pollution happens, it's permanent. This is not, as I mentioned, not something that the genie can be put back in the bottle. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and when the Cuyahoga River caught fire in 1969, that's sort of what people remember Cleveland for. If you haven't been from Cleveland, you say, oh, that's the place where the river caught fire. and that doesn't do justice to the whole city. But so once you'd have the pollution of the boundary waters here, and from these mines, is that the reputation would be absolutely devastated, and the recreation industry would be absolutely destroyed. So you would truly devastate this this industry that's sustainable and is really in harmony with the environment up there. So any more questions right at this point here?
Yeah, this is Mark here again. I would encourage any of you, if when things open back up, to take a tour up in there. Of course, the North Shore, Highway 61 going up the North Shore of Lake Superior is just fabulous. But I would encourage you to go over and take a look at Hibbing, and go look at Hibbing High School, and see where who is it got kicked off the stage there?
Bob Dylan.
Bob Dylan got kicked off the stage in high school there, but the high school is magnificent, and the mining companies moved the whole town. But in the meantime, what's happening up there now and in Duluth, there are all kinds of small businesses blooming. There are restaurants, there's brew pubs, there are all kinds of things, and there's the bike trails, the snowmobile trails, the cross country. There's whole connections of things going on up there that you have no idea that's going on up there, and it's just fabulous. My wife's niece is station manager of KAXE, the public radio station in what is it? My mind is well, it'll come to me. But anyway, there's really interesting community things happening up there. Grand Rapids is where she's at, but it's very interesting things going on up in northern Minnesota. You have no idea, and the culture's good. And but I really don't think the mines would just take away. And I think that a number of permanent jobs probably aren't very many, like the coal industry here in Illinois. And it's interesting to see you've listed Sean Caston, our Illinois 6th District rep, who's one of the people that we're supporting down here for re-election. So anyway, Chris, I'll turn it back over to you.
Sure. And, Mark, your comments raise a couple interesting points here. One of the things when people up in that part of the state here that were against these mines, what they hear is that we're against their culture and against what their fathers or grandfathers did in the iron mines, the taconite mines up there. And so, and I'm very aware that just as in Illinois you have that rural urban divide, with that rural urban divide here in Minnesota, that we need to speak in a way that does not attack people and does not create that cultural divide. It's one we're really being very sensitive to that. And I'll show you how and that the high school that Mark was referring to, the mining industry put a lot of money sort of back in the day into it, and it is really a beautiful structure. And but I'll tell you how hard they play on things here. So there is something called the Iron Range. It's called the IRRB, the Iron Range Rehabilitation Resource Board. And essentially, what it does, it has a royalty on the taconite, the iron mining, and it creates this fund that's supposed to be used for reinvesting in within the region there, for as a way of in large part to diversify the economy and to make sure some tax dollars stay there to make the communities healthier. I had shown that picture of the wild rice bed for the Fond du Lac reservation there. So there's a town on the reservation that has a problem with drinking water contamination, and one of the ways to alleviate that is to have a new water tower built. And it would be built by basically 3/4 of federal money and like 1/4 state money. And so our proposal was just up. This is just this month, that there was a proposal for a $250,000 grant to the Fond du Lac Band for this project here. And they were Democratic state senators that led the charge to recommend not giving the Fond du Lac Band that grant because the Fond du Lac Band is opposing the PolyMet mine. And so it just shows you the sort of bare-knuckled approach that's being taken there. And so it's really it's truly there's another reservation up there called the Boys Fort Reservation, and they have a casino where before COVID-19, one of the state senators was going to have a fundraising event, but this Democratic state senator pulled the fundraising event from that casino because of the tribe's opposition to the sulfide mining. So it just really shows you the kind of nature of what's going on up there. It's very tough, but there are also acts of desperation because even the public up in northeastern Minnesota, which you would think which is perceived as being all pro mining or strongly pro mining, that simply is not the case. That the poll that was taken, an independent poll that was taken, showed that 57% of the people that live up there also oppose these mines. And so this is a situation where the public is ahead of the politicians here. The politicians are behind the curve here, and to kind of give you a sense of that, Amy Klobuchar, the U.S. senator that was who ran for president, has been at best neutral and from our perspective in support of these mines here. And so it's really hugely problematic and difficult. So it becomes and again, I think Amy Klobuchar is not reading the public well here, but what she would say is, hey, I support labor, and really, I think she's misreading where the public is at now. But that's gives you a sense where a very savvy politician like Amy Klobuchar, very successful politician, is now kind of trying to be neutral on the issue and dance around it, but as recently as last year, a letter from her was on the Twin Metals website. Basically a pro mining letter from Amy Klobuchar was on the website there. So, and So I know it's kind of dismaying here. So we have a congresswoman from Minnesota, Betty McCollum, that introduced a bill earlier this year, HR 5598. And so what this bill would do is it would really deal just with the Twin Metals situation, but it would withdraw over 237,000 acres of federal land from sulfide mining. So essentially, it would say that this federal land that's outside the boundary waters, but right along the border of it, where Twin Metals is located, that they would not allow sulfide mining in that area. They would say this would be a no. You could have like smaller mines for like a gravel mine for roads or things like that, but nothing large scale of this type where you'd have this acid runoff. And so right now it has 44 co-sponsors in the House, so it has a little ways to go. But including the three members of Congress from from Illinois there that I've listed there. Representatives Garcia, Bustos, and Caston are co-sponsors of the Betty McCollum bill here, and so if you're in their districts, please thank them for co-sponsoring Betty McCollum's bill, HR 5598 here. And so our people on the phone, are you in any of those districts there? You are?
Yeah, Betty McCollum she's my congressman.
Oh, great.
I've mentioned it to her many times. Support. And also Amy and Tina. I've kind of called them up.
Well, fantastic. Thank you for doing that, Mike. That is
a lot of NWSOFA is in Caston's. We've endorsed him, so we will definitely be thanking him.
Great. So we are working. So we're working at the congressional level on twin metals. At the state level, we're working on this bill. It's called a Prove It First bill. And for about 20 years, from 1998 until 2017, Wisconsin had a Prove It First bill. And what the Wisconsin bill did is that it would require a mining company that was trying to get a permit for a sulfide mine to prove that it had been done safely elsewhere in the country for 10 years, and that the mine had been closed for 10 years without polluting groundwater or surface water. And so this was a law that was under the Scott Walker administration was repealed. But this Prove It First law was in place in Wisconsin for about 20 years and successfully stopped these sulfide mines from being built in Wisconsin. So right now we are working behind the scenes to get a Prove It First bill introduced. It was actually introduced this year, but with the wake of COVID-19, we just had no traction. We'll introduce this in the Minnesota legislature next spring, and there's a lot of support for that. And we'll try to get this Prove It First bill passed at the state level, which would stop both twin metals and polymet here. We're trying to get this Prove It First bill passed in Minnesota, and we're learning from the experiences in Wisconsin, and we're trying to bulletproof this law so that it really is effective at protecting our water resources. So, for example, in Wisconsin, the mining companies tried to get around this law by giving examples of mines that were done in out into the desert where you don't have water coming in contact with the ore or things like that. And we're trying to have language that shows that it has to be shown that it has been done safely in a similar sort of environment that you would have up in the Midwest here. So, and this is something that that all of you should find really interesting, that are since you're so politically engaged here. So this gets into, can you hear me? Am I losing connection? Please say if you can hear me. Okay, connection there. We have established a nonprofit affiliate called Friends of the Boundary Waters Action Network. And so this is a nonprofit that's organized under what they call IRS code section 501c4, and organized under that under section 501c4, which is different than a 501c3 nonprofit. You can do political activities. And we have established a PAC, a political action committee called the BWCA PAC. That let's see. Does someone have a question here? Let's see. Karen, are you, Karen, please let me know if you have a question or so here. Trying to think. Okay. So we've established this political action committee to support pro-Boundary Waters candidates. And so this is where we're trying to use all the tools in the toolbox here to endorse and support political candidates that are pro-Boundary Waters. And so this is something we're very, very excited to be doing this year. We're going to focus on the state legislature this year. We will endorse some members of Congress, but we'll be active on state races here in order to flip the tide and ensure that we have a truly pro-Boundary Waters legislature here. And I will. Here are some things that you can do. I am very interested in Congresswoman Betty McCollum. It looks like we're freezing up here. Can you hear me? If you'd please say yes or no.
Yes. Yep.
You can still. Okay, great. So I would love to have all of you part of our Citizen Action Network of individuals. It looks like we're having problems still. Can you hear me? You can. Okay. Good. Okay. Great. To be active, Congresswoman Betty McCollum asked us to nationalize the issue, and we need to reach out to people in Illinois and all across the country. Because the Boundary Waters in this area and Lake Superior are national treasures, and we should have a national effort to protect the Boundary Waters. If you would contact thank the members of the Illinois delegation that are currently co-sponsors of HR 5598. And then reach out to other members of the Illinois delegation and ask them to support it. And I'd like you to reach out to Congresswoman Betty McCollum and thank her for the work that she's done. As you can see, it's a pretty courageous stand for her, and she's truly a hero in my estimation. Betty McCollum is a true modern day hero for the Boundary Waters here. And her chief of staff is named Bill Harper. And if you would please send her an email if you're like Mike and in her district, but if you're also in Illinois as well, tell her that that you're very grateful for her bill HR 5598, and that you're advocating in Illinois that members of Congress there support her bill. And Bill Harper is her chief of staff. And if you send him a quick note saying, that you were on this presentation from Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness by myself, Chris here, and that you are very grateful for the work that Betty McCollum is doing. And I know that sometimes people like that don't get the the full appreciation for the work that they do here. Can you still hear me? Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can still hear me. Okay.
Yeah. Chris, where's Betty McCollum's district?
Sure, that's in St. Paul, Minnesota, in that area, and the communities that surround St. Paul. There. And I would be great on your Facebook pages and other social media if you would spread the word to protect the Boundary Waters and Lake Superior. And it's very important on the messaging that there are two minds and one threat here. So there is our concern is that the political split here might be to permit polymet and not permit twin metals as a way of politicians trying to appease everyone. The problem with that is there are many problems with that. But one of them is that PolyMet is much further along in the permitting process. And if that is given the green light, then there's no really stopping twin metals. So splitting the baby in half is truly splitting the baby in half, and in this situation here. So there's two minds and one threat. And if you'd please spread the word about the problems with twin metals and PolyMet here. And we're again very excited about engaging in the political system. And there's the website for us, the www.bwcapac.org. So at that website, you can see what we're doing there, and both that 501c for to the PAC, those donations are not tax deductible, but our work as a 501c3 to Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness is tax deductible. So if you want to provide some financial support, that would be great. But promoting us on social media and being part of our Citizen Action Network would be hugely helpful to us. And making this a Great Lakes issue, here. And so, one of the real interesting things, just as as people need the wilderness to escape and decompress and for our nourishment, the wilderness really needs people. And so, the protection of this lake area and Lake Superior really depends on people such as yourself. And so, you are really the strength of the success of protecting the area over this last 40 years is based on, ordinary people becoming politically involved, and that'll be our success in the future is dependent upon the same thing as well. And there's my cell phone. There's my email. My phone number is there. My email address is there. Our website is www.friends-bwca.org. And so there you can get lots of information about our work at Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness as well. So I'm, again, very grateful for your time this evening and being part of your evening. And I welcome some more thoughts and questions and comments. If you have some, Mike's in Minnesota, and I welcome the comments. Mark has spent time here, so we can have continue this conversation here.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
This is Mike. I'm familiar with Save the Boundary Waters organization. Now,
Yes.
Are you in coalition with them, or how do you work with them?
Interesting question. We're both in a coalition with them, but we do have some distinct differences. And so Mike, we're in a coalition with. There's another organization called Save the Boundary Waters, and we the mission of that organization is to stop twin metals. Our mission is broader. In addition to protecting the boundary waters, we also have the programs that I mentioned where we provide scholarships to students from underserved communities. So the question again was how we were different from Save the Boundary Waters. That's a program of a separate organization, and so we are completely aligned with them in defeating twin metals. And except that we are broader. Am I freezing up again? Can you still hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, but our programs are broader in that we have the education programs and scholarship programs to get kids out of the boundary waters. We're also different in another important respect is that they are not opposed to PolyMet, because PolyMet is primarily would pollute Lake Superior. And so we are actually concerned with that approach, because in effect it allows politicians to give the green light to polymet and to stop twin metals. And so, so Mike, that's a very important distinction of things. And in fact, the former director of the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, the individual who gave the green light to polymet, is now the head of the Save the Boundary Waters organization. And so it creates some challenges there, candidly, Mike. They have some great people there, but we do have this fundamental difference as well.
Okay, thanks.
We'll talk about conflict of interest.
Right. It's a huge problem there. Is it freezing up again here?
Yep.
Okay.
We're back on. Can we?
Audio's okay.
Audio's okay. It really is a huge conflict of interest going on here. And in fact, this will, one of the lead attorneys for polymet is now the deputy chief of staff for the current Democratic governor of Minnesota. So exactly right. And so it's there are some really difficult political waters to navigate here, and so we are again being active in supporting pro-boundary waters candidates, and so I'm very excited about what this next year will look like politically, because there is a great deal of political support for what we do, particularly in those purple districts, the suburban districts around the large metro area. There were a number of state representatives elected this past year in those districts that support what we're doing. We just need, just like at the federal level, what we need to win a couple houses and a couple seats in the state Senate to have control of the state Senate. It's Republican controlled. And if we get a couple seats there, if we get a couple pro boundary waters Democratic state senators, I think it'll be a whole new ballgame politically in Minnesota on this issue. So I'm very, very excited to use all the tools in the toolbox that we have here.
Seems like you've got some Democrats up there that need to get on board with the Democratic position on climate.
For sure. It's it's a much different much different mindset up there, and the climate deniers up there are very strong, and they are rapidly losing power. As Mark mentioned about the city of Duluth, the city of Duluth is one of these true success stories of a community that's reinvented itself and has really embraced the future. And so you have a lot of progressive energy in Duluth, and there's a business person down there who created he has a business for making outdoor furniture. He's out of recycled plastic, and he's very opposed to polymet, and he said, look, this is the future of the area, and having 300 or 600 jobs in one fell swoop, where the modern economy is being built, you start at 10, 15, 20, 50, 100 jobs. Like, he now employs just under 100 people. And it's businesses like that don't want to have pollution coming on down to Lake Superior. And so it's the change is real. The sort of but there are still some, as you might experience in downstate Illinois, some elected officials, even Democrats, that are really like Joe Manchin in West Virginia, that perhaps know in their heart of hearts that there's a problem out there, but don't admit it publicly.
Yeah, at Duluth has become there's a real tech incubator, technology incubator in Duluth, and it's really interesting what's going on there. Lots of restaurants, small businesses. It's well worth a look, and it's too easy for me to sit here and say, well, the obvious connection in Minnesota is if you hurt the hunting and fishing industry up there, then you're going to make people really angry. And they've all got cabins up there, and people like their outdoors, and this isn't going to help them. And I don't think that many jobs are going to be created. And if they pollute the area, then the problem, is going to last for a long time, never get cleaned up. So anything we can do to help is a good thing. So
it seems like the issue should be a net job creation, because if they create these jobs at the mines, but it causes all these other outfitters in it to go out of business, that could be a net zero job creation, or even worse.
Exactly right, and that's what the Harvard economist had actually grown up in Minnesota, and when he did this analysis of these 60 some different scenarios of what the future might look like. Am I freezing up again, guys? Can you hear me? Or
still here, your face vanished, but
okay,
you'll come back, I guess.
Okay, that's exactly the point the Harvard economist made, was what you said, Jim, that these mines actually have, in the long run, certainly a very negative effect on the economy. You just don't get that diversification. You don't you don't get like what you've gotten in Duluth now. That's sort of just an entrepreneurial spirit and an influx of younger people coming in. You just don't get that with the mining industry. And it's really, the mining industry has been very skillful up until now in kind of trying to direct the public narrative. But in the last, certainly the last 2 years, we have really begun to change public opinion, and we have the momentum behind us. The more people know about what's going on, the more people support what we do. And the scandal surrounding what's happened with PolyMet at the state level is helping us fight twin metals, and help is helping get the word out and educate the public. And so I'm very much a believer in the political system, and we need to, as an organization, embrace the political system and be active in the process, and support candidates that are pro boundary waters. And so it's one of those, candidly, one of the things, it now looks like Amy Klobuchar is not in the running for being vice president, but it was something I was kind of, her staff had been very equivocal on these issues of mining. And I was thinking, boy, if Amy Klobuchar became vice president, what would that mean for us if Joe Biden is elected? So it's a very interesting political situation. Obviously, there's a lot at the state level where we can really do to make a difference, and it's takes less money where we can make a difference. So we're focusing on the state legislature right now, but we will be we're lobbying nationally, but we'll be active politically nationally in the upcoming years as well. And it's this is one of those issues that, as we look at what might happen in the fall of November of this year, I think this is one of those bellwether issues of which way is the country going, and I think this shows that where a lot of the momentum is behind issues like this across the different issues affecting us, whether it's healthcare, gun control, or things like that, or climate change too, obviously.
Yep.
It's hard to turn the ship around after it's been going this direction for a long time, but you just got to keep trying.
Mm-hmm. Exactly right, and I think we all know how much courage it takes to run for office, and the time and the sacrifice, and that's why we want to support those candidates. And one of the things that we do have, we have periodic, we call it lunch with the friends. Can you hear me right now, or am I frozen up? Is it? Can you hear me, or?
Audio.
Okay.
Can't
All
see
right.
you right now, but you're good. Yep.
We have periodic lunch with the friends series of live video presentations. We were doing them weekly. Now we're moving to roughly every other week in the wake of this COVID-19 pandemic, trying to stay connected with people. So we will have an upcoming one of these webinars on July 8th, and I can send you a link to that. Maybe I'll get your email addresses and I can send you the link. And this webinar will be a really interesting one. So there is a documentary filmmaker based in New York City who became interested in the mining issue, and he was looking at possibly doing a frontline type of production about this mining issue that I've been talking about here. And so he did a Freedom of Information Act request to get some documents relating to twin metals. And he was stonewalled by the Trump administration at every turn. And he ended up filing a federal lawsuit without any legal representation, just by himself. And he's gotten some, and the Trump administration, as we know, is notorious at redacting documents and not and truly violating the whole freedom. We're going to have one of these presentations at 12 noon Central Time on Wednesday, July 8th, and we're going to have this documentary filmmaker who's done these Freedom of Information Act requests, and kind of what his Freedom of Information Act request have shown is really how the Trump administration and twin metals, how the Trump administration is really colluding with twin metals to try to get this mine rammed through. And it will be a really interesting presentation. It'll last about 30 minutes on Wednesday, July 8th. And I'll get your email address and I can send you the link to that. And they're free. And I think you'll find that interesting. We're trying to we've had a series of these presentations since the COVID-19 pandemic has come upon us to connect with people. We've done some fun things about planning canoe trips into the boundary waters, and as well as looking at these mining issues. We've had our attorney give a presentation. We've had a deep dive into the financial implications of things as well. And maybe I'm trying to think if maybe I can show you some other things on our website where you can get some of these resources, and maybe I'll go to our website here and just kind of show you some for a second that maybe this would be of interest to you. Can you see the page right now?
It's blank.
It's a blank. Okay. Let's see what I can do. I will stop sharing that, and I'm gonna try to share it with all of you right now. So, can you see that now?
There it is.
There you go. Okay. This is our website here, and you can see we have a lot of tabs on here. So at the top, we have, with the Two Mines, One Threat, a detailed look at the mining issue. So here you can kind of learn more about these foreign corporations, and we have a deep dive into these issues here. And so you can get the lowdown on all these mining issues as well. We also are trying to promote getting out into the boundary waters here, and so we have as well ways of getting out to canoe, and so we have various. As a way of this again is how we're different from the Save the Boundary Waters, Mike. We're trying to really connect people to the boundary waters. So we have help with route planning if you want a 2-day, 3-day, or 4-day. There's just information on what these routes would look like. So we have a map that'll give you a general sense, and then a description of that. And this is a way that we're trying to really be a true resource for everyone out in the public there.
That would have helped me in '67 when I first went up there.
All right. And on these webinar issues, it's at the bottom of our page here. Let me see if I can scroll down here. We have, it's a little tough to have all this on our website, but here we have our webinars here, where you can get a look at some of these different ones. Last week we had one on wildlife and nature photography in the boundary waters. And then we had sort of tips and tricks for a great boundary waters trip. Then we had a previous one dealt with that financial risk that I mentioned, where we had a former CFO of Multi-Meal actually give a presentation on that. And so these are all different resources out there, and I can send you the link to the upcoming one. But you can go to the website here and get current information about the boundary waters and the work that we're doing here. And we're in the midst of working on this on our website here for the for our political arm here. But this is the website where we're going to in the next week have a list of the candidates that we'll be endorsing here. And so it's where we'll have a very we talk about getting involved and being politically involved here. So that's at bwcac.org. So this is and I think that this is the tool for nonprofits such as ourselves that are working in this policy space, the way we can be all the more effective here.
Great.
Thank you. And so I welcome other thoughts and comments and on things here.
Well, Chris, I can tell you that in Chicago, we're not playing baseball. We're not going to be playing football. We aren't playing basketball, and we're not playing hockey. So your little advertisement to the very end there, these 3-day and 2-day and 4-day trips is a great sense. We really want to thank you very much. I know that Mark has to close the meeting now. So Mark, if you would, a huge thank you to Chris. And Mark, let's commit to getting updates from Chris and maybe asking him to join in some of our future meetings, just to give us an update, a 5-minute section as to what is happening. We've had some just great speakers, and all of these issues are interconnected. And hopefully in November 3rd, we'll make the first big step on all of these interconnected issues. Mark, I'm going to turn it back to you. Thank you so much, Chris.
Yeah, Chris, thanks so much for coming on, and it's interesting to see these things. And
Gosh,
on our test,
I can no longer hear you here.
Chris, you can't hear us?
Now I can. Now I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, on our testing, Bill mentioned he's a pretty big guy, so he wouldn't want to get in one of the little canoes. But if we've got a tour that has a North canoe or a Montreal canoe, we could do that.
There you go. There.
Bill, you don't know, North canoes and Montreal canoes were the big freight canoes that the fur trappers used. And a Montreal canoe is 34 feet long and paddles 7 on a side. So they've got 14 people paddling those things with a big steerman. So we can accommodate you, Bill. So something to look forward to. But Chris, thank you so much for coming on. And there's a lot to chew over here, and it's interesting to see we've got some connections between our federal reps, and maybe we can even get our senators to lean on Amy a little bit.
That'd be great.
And bring her around. Other than that, I'm gone. I'm done here. Just to say that we've got Kelly McGinnis coming up next month to present. She's the executive director of Mississippi River Network, which also connects to these things. So, but Chris, we'll look forward to your information, and thanks again for coming on, and we'll keep connecting.
Sure. Thanks so very much, everyone. I'm so glad for the invitation. It's my pleasure to be part of this. So thank you so very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.